On RTE, Airtel page 199. You must be over 18 to enter. Lines will close at 11:25 tonight, and later on we'll be calling someone live, and you must be there to take the call, otherwise you don't get the prize. Now, fans of the Jerry Ryan Show will be very familiar with my next guest, who was a regular reporter on that programme for many, many years. And just 4 years ago, when she discovered she was pregnant with her second child, her joy was short-lived when she received news that threw her life into turmoil. To tell us her story, would you welcome, please, Evelyn O'Rourke. How are you?
I'm great.
Yeah, congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, really great achievement. Your first child was only 6 months old, Evelyn, and you found out you were expecting a second baby. Happiness all round.
Yes, a little bit stunned, I have to be honest.
Little surprise,
but thrilled.
was it?
Yes, it was a lovely surprise. But I was on maternity leave for Oisin, my first son, so it wasn't, exactly the plan, but joyful and brilliant and wonderful and giddying. And I thought I'm going to get a lot of slagging and there'll be a lot of messing. And
the Irish twins thing.
The Irish twins thing is certainly there, but wonderful and just great.
Yeah.
And just a joyful day when we discovered.
So you're ready for the next phase of motherhood and parenthood and everything that goes with it.
Digging back out the maternity leggings, all the stuff that I'd kind of thrown at the back of the cupboard. I thought, right, they're going to be hauled back out again.
They weren't too far back.
They weren't covered in mothballs or anything.
Just at that point.
So yeah, it was that funny feeling of, we're back to this again. But wonderful.
And before we move on to that, we kind of have to take 2 steps back a little bit to about 2 months before that, isn't that right? When you noticed there was something wasn't quite as it should be with yourself. Maybe take us there. Yeah,
it's a funny thing, Ryan. When women have just had a baby, you get an awful lot of funny lumps and bumps all over your body, and for a while maybe your body's unfamiliar to you. And one night I was dressing and I noticed something, and I find it very hard to describe it. I sort of clumsily described it as a pimple, and it was sitting right beside my nipple on my right breast. And I went, right, that's odd. But it wasn't a lump, and we're all very aware of that message, and that's great that people know you have to watch out for, lumps maybe specifically. Yeah. So no major sort of alarm bells went off for me. I just went, but I carried on, dressed, whatever. I was busy with the baby, sleepless nights, all that stuff. Sure. So I put it at the back of my mind, but it was sort of there lurking and kind of bothering me a little bit. And then a few weeks later, Jerry Ryan died on April 30th. So everything just kind of really, that became all-consuming for me, I suppose. So I sort of forgot about me in the middle of it all. And then a week or two later after that, it was still there. And I thought, at this point, maybe I should go and ask somebody about it to rule it out as a problem.
Okay, and were you pushed to do that? Or did
No.
you... No, you felt, okay, you look, given your job and you interviewed people, you'd met people, so you knew get it checked out. It was an obvious thing to do.
Exactly, it felt responsible to do.
I suppose the confusion, you can tell me because you know more than I do, obviously, about this, but people talk about lumps, don't they?
Yes.
Whereas you mentioned the word pimple there. They're very different, I suspect, in terms of your suspicions.
Yes, I suppose so, and maybe that's why I was quite calm about it. Because, when you kind of look at unfortunate teenagers and they have that really bad acne breakout, to me that's what it slightly looked like. So I was thinking, acne on your breast doesn't sound particularly wonderful, but maybe it was that.
One of the things.
And as I said, my body had changed a lot. I'd had a baby, so it wasn't maybe unexpected to have weird things going on.
Okay, so...
But it was just there too long.
The presence, and it was niggling at you.
It was niggling me a little,
So you get the great news about you being pregnant with your second child, and I think it's 4 days after that you're back to the hospital for results of I presume it was a biopsy of some sort on the lump or the pimple, as you call it. Tell me what you experienced at that point.
We had started investigating the pimple, and I was convinced it was going to be a cyst. And I don't even know what a cyst is, but it's one of those phrases you hear. So I was going, that's fine. It'll be a cyst, so that's grand. Then the news came that we were pregnant again, so I was kind of giddy about all that. So to be honest, when we went back into the hospital 4 days after my, positive pregnancy test, I slightly sauntered into the hospital. I thought it'll be a cyst, it'll be fine. I think John, my husband, was probably far more suspicious at that point. We sailed in the door. I remember it's very hard to remember that moment now because I think I was so innocent walking into the hospital that day. I walked in as a civilian. I went into our consultant, Mr. Dennis Evoy, who was amazing to me throughout the whole thing. And looking back now, I realise the atmosphere in the room was very subtly different from any time I'd met him before. He asked me, could he have a quick look again? I undressed. I suddenly realised my fingers were shaking as I was trying to dress myself back up. And I sat down in the chair and he didn't speak until, obviously, till I was ready to sit down again. And he just turned around and said, we have the results of your biopsy. And I'm really sorry to tell you this, but there's a problem. There are anomalies there. And it was almost like getting, I can imagine, a gunshot to the heart. I just
was it
stopped.
instantaneous?
It was
that
instant.
punch, if you like.
It was physical. It was
Really?
visceral. It was extraordinary.
Your husband John was beside you.
Yeah.
How did he take it?
Dennis said the news to me. I stopped. I don't know how I did this because I'm usually very kind of emotional and cry over anything, but I suddenly just went ice cold. And I turned to Dennis and I said, Dennis, I have a 6-month-old baby at home.
Yeah.
I am now pregnant again. Is this terminal? I don't know how I found those words, actually. I don't know who asked those words. It doesn't feel like something I would do, but it just became very clear that I had to ask that question. And then John collapsed beside me in the chair.
He fainted?
Yeah.
Because it was just too much?
It was too much, and I think we've talked about it endlessly since, and I tell him now it was a very romantic thing to do that it proves he loved me.
I love that spin on it, by the way. It's very sweet.
I had to give him something.
No. But maybe it was. He was so invested in your future and your relationship that he just couldn't believe that it had happened. And you kept going, obviously, then, at that meeting, but you had to go home.
I had to go home.
And percolate and deal with all of this. You hear the word cancer, you dig into the book every now and again to find the humour, which I love, the dark humour. And you say riddled. You talk about the word riddled, and you kind of almost joking with it.
Yeah.
Because you felt that the word cancer has this kind of connotations.
It does. I mean, the word cancer has a whole language around itself. Even the word itself, I find a horrible word. I'm not very comfortable still using it. I say that thing, or all these kind of little euphemisms you come up with. But I remember going home that night, and I still hadn't cried. Which is, again, extraordinary because I'm usually, sobbing down the plug hole over an ad on television, But it was like it was nearly too important. And I kind of didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I remember just sitting at our kitchen table, in this beautiful kitchen that I love and I'd had so many wonderful memories in. And the overriding thought was, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be pregnant and to deal with the breast cancer diagnosis. And John, very sensibly, which he always is, said, nobody does. Yeah. So then he just said, what we do now is we break life into 5-minute segments and we just get through the next 5 minutes. And we came up with that plan that night, and that is how we ricocheted our way through that first weekend. But we had to discuss
There are a lot
so
of
much.
5 minutes in a day.
There sure are.
So to be going from
and
5
a night.
and a night, which is probably the hardest of them all. But the 5-minute to 5-minute thing from the book certainly seems to have got you through the 5-minute project or plan, whatever you want to call it. Tell me how that worked in practice.
Silly things, like you'd come out to the hospital and you may have got some more news and you'd be very overwhelmed, and we would say, we're not dealing with that news right now, we're going to pay for a car park ticket, which is an endless, choring, boring job you have to do when you're dealing with hospitals. So that would be 5 minutes. That would get us home. And what's amazing is your mind kind of rises and falls, and in the book I mentioned that once the news came, I almost had like a ticker tape, like you'd have at a news station. I am pregnant, breast cancer. I mean, it was exhausting. But you can't live kind of at that high level all the time. And sometimes you sat there and went, I just want to watch, Coronation Street. When everything would calm down from it, and then you'd kind of get panicky again.
And then deal with and forget.
Because I was looking towards 8 months of this. It was very early days
of the
pregnancy.
You've got cancer, you're pregnant. What were you told was available to you for the future?
Professor John Crown was my oncologist for that part of it, and from the very start he was very calm, very cool as he is, very reassuring, and his message to me was, we will treat you like any other patient. I have done this before. I have treated women, unfortunately I've had to treat women who are pregnant with cancer.
Sure.
I've been doing it, I think he sort of said 16 or 17 years at the time. He said, I have photographs of these kids. And this was the huge thing for me, Ryan, to be told you can have chemotherapy in pregnancy, because that was something that I never knew you could do safely.
Because you had the lumpectomy.
Yeah.
And then you are now physically, you describe it very, very vividly, your physical transformation from regular gal with normal body, if you like, to now disfigured. Is that the word you'd use, or what word did you use? Or
I think it was weird. I think that first day when the last of the bandages came off, I suddenly looked down at this body of mine that was unfamiliar. I was 38. You should know my body, and now I had a new part to it. And I'd lost about 1/3 of the breast at that stage.
Yes.
It was a lumpectomy, not a mastectomy, so not as invasive, but still, not to be recommended. I had a scar across, and to me it looks like almost like a blank page. And actually the scar has faded away so much, even in the couple of years. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But it is an incredible moment to look down at your body and go, I willingly did this. And what's amazing is minutes before you get a cancer diagnosis, you would be very worried if you cut your finger. You'd be grabbing the plaster given out. Within minutes of getting cancer diagnosis, you are discarding intimate parts of your body. You will do anything for this to be taken out of your body. So that seemed, at that moment, a small price.
And the pummeling, if you like, continued, because you had to have lymph nodes removed.
Sure.
You had, there was a particular moment where you describe as being the lowest point, which was what?
People ask all the time what the lowest point was, and they're the obvious headline moments.
Yes.
But for me, actually, personally, maybe the lowest point was in the wake of that infection. I'd had the lymph nodes removed, and you get a little drain in, and that all gone fine, and the drain had been removed, and within 24 hours, an infection had kicked in. And again, everything was more complicated because of the pregnancy. In normal terms, I suppose you'd give somebody antibiotics, you know, but in my case, that wasn't an option. So my temperature was soaring higher and higher, and really, that was the moment that was probably trickiest for my family. John and my sister Kim have talked about it being that day because my temperature went right over to 41.3.
41.3, which of course is, you're into the danger zone.
43, 44 is extremely serious.
So were you conscious at that stage? Do you know what was going on?
I remember kind of writhing around the bed and going, having moments of clarity, what is this? And then going back into a kind of a delirium. But what was really clear was John came into me and said, they're going to have to operate again. And I thought, this is now my 3rd general anaesthetic. This baby, this fetus is, 10 weeks old? Like, I'm struggling. How is this little person going to make this journey? And he said, it's fine. They know what they're doing. We have no choice. This is for you and this is for the baby. And we signed the form. And I just trusted my doctors so much at that point. I invested everything in them. And I just let myself be wheeled off in the gurney.
You mentioned about your sister Kim and John. What did they say to you about that time? Because you probably weren't as compos mentis as you would have liked to have been. So how did they reflect on that day?
We didn't talk about it for a good while.
Did you not?
No, I think because everything was about survival. Yeah. So in lots of ways we didn't really look back. Mm-hmm. We would go, right, that's done, the infection's done, and march on. And a pregnancy kind of demands that, I suppose. When we've talked about it subsequently, they've both said to me that that was the moment that they thought was the darkest moment. And I think for everybody, it was very hard to see, and for them, that I would be fine and that the baby would be fine, you know. Yeah. And it is...
I'm getting the impression that mortality was looming large at that point. I mean, did anyone ever say it, or was it the great unspoken?
No one said it, but I felt so dreadful that day. I actually said to John, if I slip away now, it's fine. Which I think maybe that's part of why it's such a low point, because I battled so hard to get to there, and to suddenly just be willing to let it slip away. And even thoughts of my 6-month-old at home, it didn't matter. I just was in such pain. And it wasn't the cancer, and it wasn't the lymph nodes. It was this bloody infection that we hear about. They're awful. They stalk, you know, patients in hospitals. Yeah. And it was the infection was the real nightmare in a way. But I suppose also was at the end, it had been a month of trauma. Yeah. And then this, and I remember just thinking, I'm no superwoman, you know, maybe this is enough. Yeah. And then they brought me for a surgery, and I woke up the next morning and went, oh, I'd really like a can of Coke now.
Of all the things.
I know.
Of all the things, isn't
and
it
they
funny?
went, oh, she's back.
She's back in the game.
Yeah.
You know, but during the recovery then, you had your first scan, I think it was, for the baby. We'll mention the baby's name in a minute, but he's just the baby for now. And the scan wasn't like a typical scan because it couldn't be.
Sure.
Why not?
Well, I was supposed to go for my first, you know, normal. I wanted one normal pregnancy experience, the regular kind of antenatal scan. But I was now in hospital again with the infection. And I remember saying to Kim, to John, what am I going to do? I just want one normal pregnancy experience here. And I suddenly thought about it. I thought, you're in a hospital. They have scanning machines everywhere. So Dr. Anna Doherty's breast check there organised for me to kind of sneak in one morning to be scanned by their regular radiologist. But the funny kind of bit is that usually parents leave a scan with these little cute wallet-sized X-rays. I had this enormous X-ray that you get from like a broken leg, you know, when you roll it up and you show it to everyone. And I had this huge kind of super-sized scan.
I'm having the biggest baby in the world.
Look at my baby! But that was the first real evidence that we had that the baby had made it as well. So that was an extraordinary moment. So I had this huge piece of evidence, and I'd heard the heartbeat.
Well, okay, let's take the heartbeat, which is such a beautiful sound, and the physical evidence of the picture. Did that help bring you into a totally different zone strength-wise?
Yes.
Did it? Or had you been there anyway without the evidence?
The few days beforehand, there was such fuss around me. I was beginning to feel a bit, what if I've made this all up and I'm not pregnant? You know, because there was so much fuss and attention. I remember slightly panicking, and I was going, I actually need evidence now. Yeah. So it was kind of like...
You're getting into delirium there. Yeah,
I didn't make this up. There is a baby. That's fine. Because everybody had been so wonderful and supportive. So it was great to kind of go, ta-da!
Tell me about chemotherapy and pregnancy. What I mean, I can only imagine the concerns.
Yes.
So where were you with that? You mentioned John Crown, and he comes out of the book, obviously, as he would do very well, by virtue of the fact that he seemed to have said, it's fine. We do this, we're doing this, relax. That must have been very reassuring for you.
It's a very good impression of him. He does lots of, we're fine.
We're okay.
The country's fine. Yes, we got lots of support. Yeah, I mean, when I went in that first day, you know, Dennis had mentioned to us, and it had been, you know, kind of seeds had been planted that chemotherapy was an option.
Yeah.
But I decided, oh, they'll do that after I've had the baby. You know, in my infinite wisdom, I'd made all these decisions. And then I realised, you know what, I did an estrogen-based pregnancy.
Yeah.
So it was breast cancer, and I was now pregnant. So I was 38, I was very young. And they were very clear to me, you know what, we're going to remove the tumour, but we need to get into preventative treatment right now.
So it's going to have to happen.
It's going to have to happen. So within a matter of hours, weeks, you'd gone from being a slightly pregnant woman to suddenly this absolute hardcore treatment programme being laid out for you, and it was kind of breathtaking.
Let me give you a quote from your own book, where you say you were concerned about what was happening with chemotherapy and pregnancy, and you said, I'm killing my baby, and I'm selfishly doing this to survive. That's a heavy thought to have.
It is, and it's a lot of why I wrote the book, because I didn't write a book, by the way. I wrote sort of a series of letters to the baby that turned into the book. I needed to be honest about those moments, because it's very easy afterwards to be brave and everyone thinks you're fabulous. And I wanted to be really honest, go, no, you know, there were a lot of moments where I wasn't brave, and there were a lot of moments that I panicked. And that was one of them. And John Cryan had given me all the assurance in the world. So intellectually I knew, he said it's safe. Once you go into the second trimester, we can give you and administer chemotherapy safely to the baby. Once the placental wall is in place, the baby will be fine. So I knew all that intellectually. But walking into the chemotherapy ward that day, to try, like, at this point women in Ireland, or generally, are not supposed to even have prawns when they're pregnant. You know, there's so many rules. You know, you have an extra glass of wine and people are like, really, pregnant? Glass of wine? You with a baby? You know. So to suddenly get rid of all that, and I'd just been pregnant, and I'd done my yoga and my Pilates and my decaf, and I'd been very responsible, and suddenly to walk into a chemotherapy ward and go, to suddenly just abandon all that, and to sit there and to allow them put a drip in my arm and to put chemotherapy drugs into my arm that I knew would make me nauseous, and I would lose my hair and I'd lose my eyebrows, and it was such a toxic thing to do. To do that knowing that there was a little person inside of me. Yeah. It felt like the ultimate abandonment as a mother, and everything about me up to then had been about protecting this baby. So even the night before I was very calm about it, but emotionally that day walking in, and that's where John was so extraordinary. And I said this to him, and he said, it's the opposite. You are saving your life by taking this treatment. This treatment is saving you so that you'll be there for Usheen, and this treatment is saving you for the baby. This is life-saving, this is not life-stopping.
It's as big to get the intellectual reassurance, I suspect, as it is to get the emotional reassurance, and that's where that twin track gets you through the darkness.
And that's why you just have to ask for help, and you have to be clever and crafty, and I surrounded myself with the best, you know, the sisters and the brothers and the neighbours and my husband. You know, I grabbed everybody around me and went, what can you do for me to get me through this?
The physical state of affairs, if you like, very poignantly described when you sat at your last day of chemotherapy.
Yeah.
And you were so used to what you looked like at that stage, because you've been through the wars. But you were struck by, I think, the reaction of others. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's very powerful, because you suddenly see yourself through other people's eyes. And, you know, I might look lovely today, and I've had lovely hair and lovely makeup done, I have a lovely goona on, and that's all great. There you see
there
me
you
there.
Are.
Yeah, there I am. Still smiling.
Yes, in fairness to you.
But, you know, pregnant and bald, not an easy look to carry off fashion-wise. I suppose. Sorry,
I was just
the pictures
thrown you, but I was just commenting on that moment in your last day of chemo.
Yeah. So
and there was a greenness to your face.
Yeah, greeny, quite pallor. And I suppose what was shocking was I went in at that stage. I was very heavily pregnant. I was probably 7 months pregnant, and usually the second pregnancy you're a little bit bigger again from the first. So I was kind of used to bumbling around the place a bit, my wig a bit askew and looking kind of crazy. And I went in. John Cryan was kind of doing his last checking me out thing and signing me off, and I was in great form, because I was thinking, great, chemo's ending today. If it's all gone, fine, and the bump's doing well. And I kind of looked at his face, and he'd all these lovely junior doctors with him. They'd asked, you know, was it okay for them to step in? And Kim, my sister, as ever, had come in to be with me. And the room was quiet again, and everybody was just very still. And I thought, oh, Jesus, there's bad news. You know, I kind of looked in alarm. I said, is there a problem here? And at that point, my top was down, and John was, you know, very gently but thoroughly checking me. And he went, oh, no, everything's fine. You're doing really well. You're signed off. And it was only later that I went, oh, it was their first time seeing me.
Yeah.
And them going, respecting what was happening and understanding that this stranger for them was bald, so clearly chemotherapy person, but was growing a baby. And I think that's why it was really shocking, because there's nothing like seeing yourself through other people's eyes, and you never want to be the talking point in an oncology ward. You know, you never want to be like the worst case in there. You're feeling sorry for everyone else, and they're like, the pregnant woman. You know, and you're like, how are you? And they're like, how are you? You know, and you're going, oh God.
Oh,
you
God,
know.
I'm the one.
Oh, it's me. No.
Tell me about what happened on the 2nd of February 2011, please.
At 11:16, I think.
Could you be more specific?
My beautiful baby son Ross was born.
Congratulations, at last. What a result. I mean, what was that like, holding him for the first time?
Oh, I took the sweetest intake of air into my lungs, because I had a C-section, and John was beside me in his George Clooney garb and all that. And they took, you know, they sort of went, it's a boy, and I went, boys. And I remember thinking, 2 boys, what does that mean? Sports bags in the hole. That's all I could think, because I'd had 2 brothers who always cluttered up the house with sports bags. So I went, sports bags. And then I went, oh, that's great. And the paediatrician had taken Ross off, and, you know, everybody in the room knew the story, and my hair was very, very short, and, you know, it was a very emotionally charged room.
Of course.
And the paediatrician took Ross off, and I remember thinking, here we go. And he turned around to me and he said, Evelyn, your baby is perfect.
Wow. What a lovely thing to hear. Amazing.
And I remember thinking, we did it.
Yeah.
And the baby did it. All I ever asked of the baby was to grow, to ignore everything.
Yeah.
Please just grow. I'll do the other stuff. You just keep growing.
Yeah.
And there we were, a family of 4. And there I am, beaming. My short hair died for the hospital, vegetable dye, it's a bit vain. And there's baby Ross.
Yeah. You call the book Dear Ross, and it's so appropriate because throughout the whole book, while you are surrounded by a wonderful family and friends, I couldn't get the impression that it was really, there were 2 of you in this fight, and you won. And congratulations. And it's great to have you on the programme. I know you're doing cancer research work as well.
Yeah, I'm a patient advocate for a charity called ICORG, a John Crown charity, and I'm now passionate about research.
Good.
The reason Ross and I are alive today is because of the research that was done over the years, unfortunately for women who'd been in my situation. And icorg.ie, go check it out. We need people to engage with research. We need all the help and support we can get, because we have to keep this fight going. We have lost too many good people to cancer.
Okay, well, your book gave me, as a man, an insight into the world of breast cancer and to the experience that women go through. And for that reason alone, I'm very grateful to you. But I'm so pleased to see you looking so well, and that life is thriving for you. And thanks for coming and sharing your story. Evelyn O'Rourke, ladies. Thanks, Evelyn.
And Evelyn's book is called Dear Ross, and it's available in bookshops nationwide. Ladies and gentlemen, after the break, we'll be joined by Hector. Brace yourselves.